Daniel was 22, an engineering student on paper, but in reality he was a survivor, not of war or disaster, but of everyday cruelty. The kind that creeps in slowly through poverty, neglect, and silence. He didn't come from wealth. He came from a rusted trailer on the edge of a forgotten town, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and still went hungry just to feed him. Electricity came and went like luck. Some nights, homework was done by candlelight. Other nights, not at all. When Daniel got accepted into university, it wasn't a celebration, it was a sacrifice. His mother sold her wedding ring to buy his bus ticket. He arrived with 1 bag, 3 shirts, and a heart full of hope. But hope doesn't pay rent. So Daniel worked. He scrubbed greasy pans in the back of a diner from 5 a.m. till class, delivered food at night, and cleaned the university's bathrooms when everyone else went home. He averaged 3 hours of sleep. He lived off discount bread and apples, some days just water. He slept in the library, tucked between shelves, pretending to study just to stay indoors. But not once did he complain. Not once did he say, "Why me?" because Daniel wasn't chasing status. He wasn't trying to impress the world. He just wanted to survive, to learn, to make something of himself. So maybe one day his mother wouldn't have to work until her bones hurt. He was quiet, always the one who held the door even when no one thanked him, the kind of person who stayed late to help classmates who mocked him behind his back. They laughed at his shoes, scuffed, torn, stitched together with dental floss. But Daniel smiled anyway, and every morning, without fail, he walked Mrs. Bell's dog. Mrs. Bell, who was blind, lived alone in an old apartment 2 blocks away. Daniel walked her golden retriever, Leo, even when it snowed, even when he was late, even when he was starving. He never missed a day. He never asked for anything in return, because kindness was his instinct, not strategy. People called him soft, naive, but they didn't know the strength it took to keep going with nothing. They didn't see the nights he'd cry into his coat behind the science building, or how he'd write emails to scholarship boards, pouring out his story, only to get silence in return. They didn't know the shame of counting coins for instant noodles while pretending it was by choice, or what it felt like to watch your classmates order Uber Eats while your stomach growled loud enough to echo. And yet, Daniel never grew bitter. He never stopped holding the door. He never stopped believing there was good in the world, even if it didn't show itself to him. He studied hard. He got straight A's. He memorized equations with a hunger deeper than food, because he believed knowledge could be his ticket out. But the world had other plans, because in a world built on connections, on privilege, on image, Daniel was invisible. To them, he was a shadow, a background character in their golden story, until one day the world saw him. But not in the way he expected. It started with a sandwich, the only food he had that day. He gave it to a homeless man shivering near the bookstore. Didn't think twice, didn't know anyone was watching, but someone was. And that one small moment, that quiet, selfless choice, was about to change Daniel's life forever. Because sometimes the world breaks you, just to see if you'll still be kind when it counts. And Daniel? He was kind when no one was watching, kind when he had nothing left, kind when kindness felt like the most foolish thing in the world. He didn't know it yet, but life was watching, and it was about to answer him. But kindness isn't always rewarded, and in Daniel's world it painted a target on his back. Enter Dean Parker, rich, handsome, charming in the way poison sometimes comes in pretty bottles. Dean came from old money and even older entitlement. He walked the campus like he owned it, because in a way he did. His father donated buildings, his mother hosted fundraisers. Professors knew his name before the first roll call. Daniel? They barely looked up when they marked him present. Dean noticed Daniel immediately, not because he saw a threat, but because he smelled weakness. And men like Dean, they hunt the weak for sport. It started small, snide remarks in lectures. "Hey Daniel, thrift store called. Your shoes are late for their shift." Or during a lab session. "Careful, don't spill anything. Can't imagine your mom could afford another pair of pants. Laughter followed him everywhere. Not the warm kind, the cold, echoing kind that eats away at self-worth. Daniel said nothing. He smiled politely. He turned the other cheek. Again, and again, and again. But Dean wasn't alone. He didn't have to be, because cruelty is contagious. Soon others joined in, not because they hated Daniel, but because it was easier than standing beside him. And the professors? They looked the other way. They handed Dean opportunities, research spots, internships, while Daniel's emails went unanswered. Try again next semester, they'd say, even when his grades were higher than Dean's, even when he worked twice as hard. It wasn't just social rejection, it was systemic. When Daniel's rent fell behind by $50, the landlord didn't hesitate, evicted him, tossed his belongings into the alley behind the building like garbage. No warning, no compassion. Daniel spent the night under a bridge that week, clutching his textbooks in a plastic bag, trying to memorize fluid dynamics while rats scurried around his feet. And still, he didn't give up. Because Daniel believed if he worked hard enough, someone, anyone, would see his worth. But the truth, to them, he wasn't a student. He wasn't a person. He was a stray dog in a world of wolves. A reminder of what they feared becoming, and a symbol of everything they believed they were above. Dean made sure of that. One afternoon, as students gathered near the quad, Daniel's shoe, already worn thin, split wide open. Duct tape unraveled in front of everyone. He bent down to fix it. Dean saw his moment. "Whoa, someone call the museum! I think a medieval peasant escaped." Laughter exploded. Phones came out. Pictures, videos. The humiliation spread faster than Daniel could stand back up. But Daniel, he didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just looked up at Dean. And for a split second, something shifted. Not in Dean, in Daniel. It was the look of someone who had finally understood that no matter how kind he was, no matter how hard he worked, the world wasn't going to save him. Not unless he changed the rules, because kindness wasn't enough in a place that rewarded cruelty. Humility wasn't enough in a place that worshipped power. And Daniel, he had reached his limit. He didn't say a word that day. He taped his shoe, picked up his bag and walked away. But something inside him had cracked. Not his spirit, his tolerance. For the first time, Daniel asked himself a question he had never dared to ask. What if I stop waiting for life to be fair? What if I stop surviving and start fighting back? And that question, quiet as it was, would soon lead him to a decision. One that would change everything. One that would make Dean Parker irrelevant. And one that would take Daniel down a path no one saw coming. Because when life breaks a good man hard enough, he either shatters or becomes something the world didn't prepare for. Daniel, he was about to become unforgettable. You'd think things couldn't get worse, but life has a cruel way of testing the kindest hearts. The week after the humiliation on campus, Daniel's world began to truly unravel. First came the text, short, cold. "We have to let you go. Business is slow." It was job number 2. Gone. The next morning, the diner cut his hours in half, said they were restructuring. But Daniel knew the truth. Someone younger, louder, prettier had taken his spot. He tried to hold on, tried to make up for it with extra shifts cleaning the university labs. But 2 days later, campus security caught him sleeping in the supply closet. They didn't ask if he was okay, didn't care that his hands were cracked and bleeding from scrubbing floors all night. They just said, "You're not authorized to be here after hours," and escorted him out. He lost that job too. And then, the phone rang. His mother's voice was weaker than usual, breathless. She said it like she was trying not to worry him. "I might need to stay in the hospital a few days, sweetheart. It's just a little infection." But Daniel heard the fear beneath her smile, and he knew what a few days really meant. She had been hiding it from him. The sickness was back, and this time it wasn't going away. The bills started coming faster than he could open them. Overdue notices, insurance gaps, numbers with too many zeros and no mercy behind them. He tried applying for emergency aid, but applications took weeks, and his bank account barely had enough to buy food, let alone medication. He sold what little he had, his watch, his textbooks, even his winter coat, thinking he could manage with just a sweater. But then came the snow. A blizzard hit the city. Temperatures dropped below freezing. The shelters were full. The library had closed for winter break. And Daniel? He had nowhere to go. That night, he found a park bench, covered in frost. Winds so sharp, they sliced through fabric like knives. He sat down, pulled his backpack to his chest. Inside, a plastic bag protected the only thing he still cared about, a photo of his mother when she was young, holding him as a baby. He took it out, his fingers trembling. The ink had started to fade, just like her voice had, just like the hope he used to carry. And then, for the first time in years, Daniel cried. Not the loud, angry kind, but the silent kind, the kind that seeps out when you finally realize no one is coming. He didn't scream, didn't curse the sky. He just pulled off his sweater and wrapped it around the photo, so it wouldn't freeze, even if he did. He curled into himself, numb, empty. And then he whispered, not a prayer, not a goodbye, a promise. I'll do whatever it takes. It wasn't said with fire. It wasn't said with strength. It was said with surrender. Because Daniel finally understood. Goodness didn't guarantee survival. Kindness didn't pay hospital bills. Integrity didn't feed his mother. And love. Love without power was just a ghost, beautiful, but helpless. That night changed him. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. Something inside Daniel stopped hoping and started planning. Because when the world breaks you in silence, when it starves you, mocks you, freezes you out, you stop waiting for justice. You become it. And as snow fell around him like ashes, as his breath turned to steam, as the city lights blurred into nothing, Daniel made the decision he would never be this powerless again, no matter what it cost. The snow melted days later, but Daniel didn't. Something inside him had frozen permanently. He moved like a ghost, going through motions, chasing odd jobs, eating what he could, speaking only when spoken to. Until one gray morning, the world blinked. It was just another day. Daniel was sitting outside the train station, sipping the free coffee handed out by a church van, half a sandwich in his coat pocket, the only food he had for the day. That's when he saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, barefoot, shivering, sitting on the concrete steps with wide, terrified eyes. Her clothes were thin, her lips purple, and her stomach, growling so loudly it cut through the morning fog. Daniel didn't think. He never did when it came to helping. He knelt, tore his sandwich in half, then stopped. She was so small, so hollow-looking. He handed her the whole thing. No hesitation, no pride, just quiet compassion. She looked up at him like he was the sun, and for a second, Daniel felt warm. He didn't notice the woman watching from across the street. Her name was Eleanor Gray, 71 years old, widowed, worth just over $2.1 billion. Her late husband had owned shipping empires, vineyards, and technology firms, but Eleanor, she was never interested in the money. She liked books, birds, people watching. And that morning, sitting in the back of her chauffeured town car, Eleanor had been watching Daniel, not out of pity, out of curiosity. There was something about the way he gave away his last meal, not dramatically, not performatively, but with quiet dignity, like it was normal, like it was expected, as if kindness had been his default setting, even in the coldest moments. She told her driver to pull over, got out, walked across the street with her cane tapping the pavement, and approached the young man who had just given away everything. Daniel turned when he heard the voice. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Would you join me for a coffee?" He hesitated, looked her up and down. Elegant coat, pearl earrings, soft, worn eyes. She smiled. "I insist." He nodded. They walked in silence to a nearby cafe. She ordered 2 cups of tea and a scone. He sat stiffly, unsure of what to say. But Eleanor didn't need him to talk. She just watched, listened, asked questions that no one had ever cared to ask. Where are you from? What do you study? What's your favorite sound in the world? He blinked. No one had ever asked him that before. They talked for an hour, then 2. And when he finally stood to leave, she handed him a small envelope. Inside was a check, full tuition, paid in advance, no conditions. He looked up at her, stunned. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Her eyes twinkled. Because I believe in return on investment. He shook his head. I can't pay you back. She raised a hand. I don't want money, Daniel. I want conversation, company, and perhaps the comfort of knowing I helped someone who wouldn't waste it. And so it began. Every day after class, Daniel met Eleanor in that same cafe. They spoke about everything, her life, his dreams, the past, the stars. She told him about the man she once loved, the son she lost, the silence that money never filled. He told her about library corners, his mother's laugh, and how pain taught him to see beauty in small things. And day by day, something strange happened. He began to heal, not through grand gestures, but through being seen. She didn't pity him. She respected him. She didn't offer advice. She offered presence. And slowly, Daniel started to laugh again, to dream again, to eat full meals, to sleep in a bed. For the first time in his life, someone saw his soul and didn't walk away. Then, one afternoon, Eleanor folded her hands and asked him a question that stopped his breath. Daniel, would you marry me? He blinked. I'm sorry. She smiled. Not for love, not for romance. I'm 71, not foolish. I'm lonely. You need help. We can give each other that, legally, respectfully, on paper. He didn't answer right away, but deep down, Daniel knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about 2 people saving each other. Daniel didn't answer Eleanor's proposal immediately. He walked home that night, if a borrowed couch could be called a home, and stared at the ceiling for hours. This wasn't the plan. But plans were for people with options. And she wasn't offering romance, she was offering dignity. The next morning, he returned to their cafe, ordered her tea before she arrived, and when she sat down, he simply said, yes. They were married quietly. No grand ceremony, just a courthouse, a signed license, and 2 hands held with mutual understanding. The news didn't stay quiet. Within days, whispers echoed across campus. He married her for the money. Did you hear? She's 71, he's 22. Gross. What's wrong with him? His professors looked at him differently. Some stopped calling his name. Others rolled their eyes during class. Daniel said nothing. Because the truth didn't need defense. It needed action. He refused to spend Eleanor's money on himself. He kept working, took the bus, packed lunches, told her, gently but firmly, that love, in any form, must be earned. Instead, he used her influence, not her funds, her voice. Eleanor wrote letters, made introductions, connected Daniel to mentors, visionaries, scholars, the kind of people who never would have looked at him twice before. He listened, studied harder than ever, and slowly, Daniel built something. It started small, a website for underprivileged students needing textbooks, then tutoring networks, then grants, mental health programs, partnerships with local food banks. Within 2 years, he launched a non-profit called the Quiet Rise Foundation. Its mission? To make sure no student ever has to choose between food and education. His face was on magazines, but not for marrying wealth, for defying it. He turned down every luxury, did interviews only when they benefited the cause, and poured every dollar raised into building dormitories, clinics, and satellite centers in neighborhoods like the one he came from. But success didn't erase the past. It echoed through him, especially in dreams. He'd see his mother coughing in that dim apartment, see himself as a child, listening to her say, "You're going to be somebody, baby. I just know it." That voice became his compass, and in every child he helped, every hungry teen he gave a scholarship to, he saw her eyes. But the world wasn't done testing him. One rainy evening, as Daniel left a speaking engagement at a university, he heard a voice, slurred, desperate. Hey, it's you." He turned, and there stood Dean Parker, unshaven, drunk, holding a half-crushed job application and wearing a suit 3 days too old. He was broke, jobless, living out of his car. Daniel froze. The boy who once laughed at his shoes now couldn't afford his own. For a moment, Daniel considered walking away. Then he remembered the park bench, the photo of his mother, the whisper to the stars. He handed Dean a card. "Come by the foundation tomorrow," he said. "We're hiring case managers." Dean blinked, tears in his eyes. "You're serious?" Daniel nodded. "I don't help people because they deserve it. I help them because someone once helped me when I didn't." Word got around, people started to see him differently, but Daniel still didn't rest. He had one more promise to fulfill. Eleanor had a mansion, the kind with 15 rooms, marble staircases, and libraries full of dust. One morning, Daniel asked if he could use it. She didn't ask why, she just smiled and handed him the keys. Within a month, the estate was transformed into the Grey Haven, a residential sanctuary for orphaned and homeless children. Each child got a warm bed, a library, tutors, art supplies, gardens to run through, and music to wake up to. And every week, Daniel would walk the halls, not as a guest, not as a savior, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. They asked him once in an interview how he got here. He looked into the camera, quiet. "I didn't rise on money," he said. "I rose on gratitude." And in that moment, the world saw not a poor student, not a scandal, not a mystery, but a man, reborn from ashes, driven not by greed, but by grace. 7 days after the courthouse wedding, Daniel woke up to silence. No birds, no morning tea clinking against porcelain, no Eleanor humming down the hallway, just silence. He found her sitting in the garden, wrapped in a shawl, staring at a tree that had bloomed too early for the season. She smiled faintly when she saw him, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sit with me, Daniel." He did. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I need to tell you something," she said softly, "but I'm afraid it will change things." Daniel shook his head. "Nothing could change how I feel about you, Eleanor." She laughed, the kind of laugh that carries weight behind it. "Not even if I told you I'm dying." Time stopped. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. "I have cancer," she said. "It's late. I've known for a while. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to marry a ticking clock." He tried to speak. She held up her hand. "I didn't marry you for time. I married you to complete something." She handed him the envelope. He opened it. Inside, a letter, written in handwriting that trembled but still danced across the page. It began simply, "If you're reading this, I'm likely gone, or soon will be. But you deserve to know why I chose you." And as the words poured out, Daniel's entire world began to unravel and reform. Eleanor had not always been Eleanor Gray. She was born Eliza May, an orphan, raised in a crumbling shelter on the edge of the city, hungry, silent, invisible. Until one winter afternoon when she was 7, a man came to the shelter. He was poor himself. His coat was threadbare and he limped from an old injury. But he brought books, warm bread, and laughter. He taught the children math using stones, told bedtime stories with firelight in his eyes. And when he saw Eleanor shivering in the corner, he took off his only coat and wrapped her in it. "He saved me," she wrote. "Not with money, but with humanity. He gave me the first warmth I'd ever known." His name was Gabriel. Gabriel Whitmore, Daniel's grandfather. Eleanor had never forgotten his face, or his voice, or the way his eyes softened when he looked at people as if they were made of stars. So when she saw Daniel on that sidewalk, giving away his last sandwich without fanfare or fear. She knew. It was the same look, the letter read, the same eyes, the same soul. I recognized him before you even spoke. Her wealth had built walls, but she had spent years waiting, watching, hoping the right soul would appear so she could finish the promise she'd once whispered into that coat. One day, I'll be the one to save someone. Daniel dropped the letter. Tears blurred the ink. It hadn't been luck, or charity, or chance. It had been destiny. Two souls crossing time and silence, bound by a forgotten act of kindness, paid forward across generations. He looked back at Eleanor. Her eyes were wet. You were never my mistake, she said. You were my purpose. A week later, she passed away peacefully, wrapped in the same shawl Daniel had bought her for Christmas, handmade, with her name stitched inside. The funeral was small, private, by her request. But Daniel stood before the gathered few holding that old letter and read it aloud. He didn't cry during the speech, not once, because in that moment, he wasn't burying his past. He was planting it, and from it, a legacy would bloom. The house felt quieter after she was gone, not emptier, just quieter, like the air itself had paused to remember her laugh. Daniel didn't fill the silence with music or noise. He let it breathe, because in that quiet, he heard her, still teaching, still watching, still loving. A week after the funeral, Daniel returned to her study. The room hadn't changed, stacks of old books, tea stains on the desk, and a chair that creaked like it had a memory of its own. He sat down, opened her desk drawer. Inside, folded neatly, was a final envelope. This one wasn't sealed, no address, just a handwritten title. For when you need to remember who you are. He opened it. Inside, a single line. You didn't marry me for money. You married me with honor. And in you, I saw the world I always hoped to believe in. Daniel closed his eyes and held the letter to his chest. She had believed in him before the world did. Now it was his turn to make the world believe in what she had seen. 1 month later, standing in front of a crowd of journalists, donors, and students, Daniel took the stage and unveiled a plaque. The Eleanor Gray Scholarship Fund, dedicated to helping underprivileged students complete their education without debt, hunger, or shame. The logo was simple, a pair of hands holding a coat. Beneath it, a quote, "Kindness doesn't die, it becomes legacy." In its first year, the foundation sponsored over 300 students, some from shelters, some refugees, some who had been told again and again that they weren't enough. Daniel visited every campus that accepted them, sat beside them during orientation, told them quietly, "You're not here by accident. Someone once believed in me. Now I believe in you." The next spring, Daniel graduated, not just from school, from survival. He wore a simple cap and gown, no designer suit, no flash. But he walked across that stage holding a photograph of Eleanor in his hand. When they called his name, he didn't cheer. He looked to the sky and whispered, "We did it." Later that evening, he stood on the edge of the school lawn where a small ceremony had gathered. A brass time capsule sat open beside him. Inside, he placed Eleanor's final letter, folded gently, preserved in glass. Not to be hidden, but to be discovered, someday, by someone who needed to remember that the world still holds magic. He sealed the capsule and turned to the small crowd of children from the Grey Haven. "You'll open this in 50 years, he smiled. "When one of you builds the next school or runs the foundation, because her story belongs to all of us now." The children clapped. One little girl, her shoes too big, her heart even bigger, asked, "Was she your grandma?" Daniel knelt down. "No," he said softly. "She was my friend." And so it was. Daniel didn't vanish into wealth. He didn't chase fame or fortune. Instead, he traveled the world telling Eleanor's story, building, listening, teaching kids that their lives were not accidents. They were stories still being written. He never remarried, not because he didn't believe in love, but because he had already lived a love story. one not written in roses or romance, but in trust, truth, and time. People would still whisper sometimes he married for money. He got lucky. But those who knew, truly knew, smiled and said nothing, because some stories weren't meant to be argued. They were meant to be felt. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love, sacrifice, and kindness still matter, don't let it end here. Like this video, so the message reaches someone who needs it. Share it with a friend, a stranger, anyone who's forgotten what real humanity looks like. And if you believe stories like this should live on, subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. Let's keep hope alive, together.